This video is sponsored by Gaud.
Hey, what's going on, people? I hope you guys are doing good. Today we have an exciting comparison. We're going to be taking a look at the Galaxy S22 Plus versus the OnePlus 10 Pro. Both of these phones are similar in a lot of ways, including price, so let's start there. When it comes to pricing, you can pick up the OnePlus 10 Pro for $899. And technically speaking, the Galaxy S22 Plus starts at $999, but right now, at the time of this video, you can grab this phone for $799, saving you $200, and it's $100 cheaper than the OnePlus 10 Pro. And in my personal opinion, that's a really good deal. So if you want to save some money and you've been looking for a Galaxy device, this might be the way to go. However, if you really want to save money, you might want to check out this video's sponsor, Gaud.
With the way our economy is right now and prices going through the roof, it's really important that we save money where we can. And what's great about Gaud is you can save money on subscription services that you use every day. Essentially, it's a marketplace where sellers share their subscriptions to help offset the cost. This means as a buyer, you can get access to a subscription for a huge discount. There are a lot of listings available broken into several categories. There's everything from audio streaming services such as Spotify, Tidal, and more, gaming subscriptions like PlayStation Now, utility tools like Clean My Mac and Microsoft Office, tons of video streaming services, VPNs, and more. How it works is simple. First, create an account which takes seconds and it's free. Then you need to add money to your wallet by credit, debit, or crypto. Once you have money on your wallet, find the service you want and subscribe. You'll get instant access to a username and password so you can start enjoying the benefits of the subscription immediately. If for some reason you run into issues or need to change something, you're given direct communication to the seller via a private chat room. In the rare case a seller is unresponsive or doesn't fix your issue within 24 hours, Gaud will step in and they'll give you your money back. It's a 100% guarantee. All your subscriptions are held in one centralized place on the Gaud website. To view them, just click on your account profile in the top right and select My Subscriptions. Listen, I knew nothing about Gaud until recently, and now that I found out about it, I love it. My wife and I subscribe to Paramount Plus for only $4, which gives us access to several shows I've been wanting to catch up on, such as Evil, Picard, and The Stand. Additionally, I was spending $8 a month on Funimation in order to watch Dragon Ball Z. Well, I canceled that and I went through Gaud, and now I only pay freaking 71 cents. Like, what the heck? If you want to check out Gaud, make sure to use the link in the description of this video, sign up for a free account, and check out the listings that are currently available. Trust me, it's an excellent service. I love it. You're going to save a lot of money on the services that you love as well, and you're not going to be disappointed.
So now that we've talked about pricing, let's talk about what you get for that money, beginning with the design of both of these phones. Design-wise, both of these phones feel excellent in the hand and they're built extremely well. The S22 Plus is thinner, but it feels thicker for some reason. I have no idea what it is about it, but in the hand, it feels like a thicker phone. With that said, the OnePlus 10 Pro is slightly heavier, and that's because of the larger battery, which we'll talk about later. The Galaxy S22 Plus feels a little bit better in the hand, in my personal opinion. The camera bump on the back is more subtle, and it has sharper edges, so it feels more like an iPhone, which is something that I'm used to. And I just overall like the design of the S22 Plus. And this phone looks very classy. However, there's something polarizing about the OnePlus 10 Pro. It has more rounded edges, including a rounded front screen, which we all know how I feel about that. But also the back side is slightly rounded, so it's more ergonomic and it fits in the hand really, really nice. The camera bump, while larger, looks really good, and I do like the Hasselblad logo along the side. And the actual camera modules themselves look really cool. Plus, this matte black texture on the back is more prominent and it feels more matte versus the S22 Plus, which is still matte, but it just doesn't feel as grainy as the OnePlus 10 Pro. And I really like the grain texture. Now, the OnePlus 10 Pro does have a leg up on the Galaxy S22 Plus when it comes to design because of the alert slider. Being able to quickly access silent, vibrate, and sound modes by using this little switch is practical, and I love it. Now, durability-wise, there are a couple differences. The OnePlus 10 Pro features Gorilla Glass Victus, and technically speaking, it does not have an IP68 rating unless you get the T-Mobile variant, but I've dunked this phone and put it in water several times and it survived, so theoretically it's water resistant. They just may not warranty it depending on the model that you get. Whereas the S22 Plus features Gorilla Glass Victus Plus and it has an IP68 rating no matter what model you get. So theoretically, the S22 Plus is a little bit more resilient and is a little bit more durable, but honestly, after holding these two in the hand, they both feel very solid. I slightly trust the S22 Plus more just off of feels, but that has nothing to do with an actual drop test or anything. That's just my personal preference and opinion, but both are very solid phones. So now that we've talked about the designs of each of these phones, let's talk about the display quality as well as the entertainment experience. Spec-wise, the Galaxy S22 Plus packs a 6.6-inch Full HD Plus 120Hz display, whereas the OnePlus 10 Pro packs a 6.7-inch Quad HD Plus LTPO 120Hz display. When it comes to each of these displays, they're both great, and I don't think anybody is going to be disappointed in either one. But if I had to give an edge to one over the other, it would be the OnePlus 10 Pro. It has a Quad HD Plus display versus the Galaxy S22 Plus's Full HD Plus, and it has LTPO technology, but the S22 Plus does have a brighter panel. It can peak all the way up to over 1700 nits, making it easier to see things on your display when you're under bright sunlight. So this is great in Florida or bright areas, whereas the OnePlus 10 Pro has a much dimmer display and it can only peak to just above 1300 nits. So here's a quick example of what I mean by the S22 Plus being brighter than the OnePlus 10 Pro. As you can see, the brightness levels are about the same. In fact, I think the S22 Plus might be slightly lower than 50%, whereas the OnePlus 10 Pro, they're about the same. So if I go to this screen right here, you can see on this white screen, the S22 Plus is quite a bit brighter. And this is not even peak brightness, this is just using regular brightness. So you can imagine at peak brightness, the S22 Plus is going to be significantly brighter. So one thing I've always loved about Samsung phones, especially their displays, is how much control they give you over your screen mode. So if you go under display settings, you can adjust things like vivid to natural. And if you're inside of vivid, you can adjust the white balance of the display. And then under advanced settings, you can tweak the RGB so you can really dial in your display to your liking. But OnePlus actually takes this up a notch. So with the OnePlus 10 Pro, you have your vivid and natural options just like the S22 Plus, but you also have a Pro mode. So if I tap on that, I can go to cinematic or brilliant, which is going to give you even more color reproduction, which is fantastic. And then below that, of course, you have your color temperature options. So like I said, the content consumption experience on both phones is fantastic. It doesn't matter which one you go with. You're not going to be disappointed when it comes to the displays, whether you're watching movies or playing games. If you want a bright display, grab the S22 Plus, but if you want that extra resolution, the added flexibility and advanced settings inside the display settings, as well as the LTPO technology, go with the OnePlus 10 Pro. But you know, displays are only half of the equation when it comes to content consumption. Speakers are also an important factor, so here's a quick speaker test.
They got word for that. They got word for that.
So now that we've talked about the entertainment experience, let's talk about the software experience. And this is where things get interesting because both of these phones are fantastic in that aspect, and they're very similar also. So let's start with the Galaxy S22 Plus. The software experience is fantastic. It's running Android 12 in One UI 4.1. It is a buttery smooth experience, as you can see. We have the Google Now feed over here on the left, and you also have tons of customization, so you can go into the Galaxy theme store and download different themes, icon packs, fonts, lock screens, always on displays, so on and so forth. You also have Samsung's DeX on board, which is a unique experience to Samsung phones. It basically turns Android into a Chromebook or more desktop-like environment, and you can do tons of multitasking. I think it's very underrated, but it's very powerful. So like I said, you can't really go wrong with Samsung's software experience. And updates are very frequent. You get monthly security updates, plus they bring plenty of new features, and there's really nothing that I can complain about when it comes to the One UI 4.1 experience on the S22 Plus. Now switching things over to the OnePlus 10 Pro, things get really interesting. Right off the bat, you can see it's almost like a stock Android or Pixel-like experience. If we swipe over to the left, we have our Google Now feed. Swiping down brings us to our notification panel. But if I swipe down on the right-hand side, we have something called a shelf, which is fully customizable. You have tons of personalization options. So if I go into the settings, then go under personalizations, I can switch up my always on display, icons, the canvas, which is a unique feature to OnePlus, the quick settings, colors, font and display size, fingerprint animation, and the horizon light. So again, tons of personalization options. I love Oxygen OS. It's very fluid, as you can see, and I love the stock-like experience that you get from Oxygen OS. The issue that I have is the updates are not quite as frequent or as routine, though the OnePlus 10 Pro has been much better than previous OnePlus devices, at least when it comes to my experience, but the OnePlus 10 Pro has been different. I would say it's actually on par with the S22 Plus in terms of the amount of updates that have been pushed out. OnePlus has done a fantastic job at pushing out fixes, enhancements, and improvements to the camera and the overall interface. So I really hope that they continue this and they really make this a priority, because in the past they have kind of slacked in that department, but like I said, things have been a little bit different with the OnePlus 10 Pro. So in case you haven't picked up the theme here, both of these phones are so similar, and this carries over to performance, and that's exactly what we have to talk about next. We need to talk about day-to-day performance as well as gaming and just the overall specs. So let's do that. So in terms of specs, the OnePlus 10 Pro packs the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, 8 gigabytes or 12 gigabytes of RAM, and up to 512 gigabytes of storage. It also packs a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. The Galaxy S22 Plus packs the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, 8 gigabytes of RAM, up to 256 gigabytes of storage, and a 4,500 milliamp hour battery. Both of these phones perform great, especially in day-to-day stuff. The OnePlus 10 Pro does have a slight advantage if you go with the higher end models, since it does come with 512 gigabytes of storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM. I wish the S22 Plus came with 12 gigabytes of RAM. It could definitely benefit from it with things like DeX and all the multitasking capabilities, but honestly, performance is almost identical on both. Very fluid, very responsive, and I haven't noticed any hiccups. Here's a few benchmarks, and as you can see, it goes back and forth. The OnePlus 10 Pro did perform better in some aspects, whereas the S22 Plus performed better in others, including the AI benchmark test. The S22 Plus was better at recognizing objects, faces, and people, so on and so forth. When it comes to gaming, both again are fantastic, and with the 120 Hz displays on both phones, you're gonna get a great experience on both. If I did have to give an advantage to one over the other when it comes to gaming, it would be the S22 Plus. It just maintains a cooler temperature versus the OnePlus 10 Pro. This isn't measured or anything, this is just going by touch. I just noticed that the S22 Plus feels a little bit cooler to the touch after gaming for an extended period of time. Battery life-wise, you would think that the OnePlus 10 Pro would be much better, since it does have the larger battery at 5,000 milliamp hours versus the 4,500 milliamp hour battery on the S22 Plus. But it's not really the case, because the OnePlus 10 Pro does have a higher resolution display, which consumes a little bit more battery versus the S22 Plus. So all in all, I would say they're about the same, but the OnePlus 10 Pro does come with a lot of added features, such as much faster charging, both wired and wireless. So for instance, the OnePlus 10 Pro can charge up to 80 watts if you have the international model, and then 65 watts if you have the US version, and then it also has 50-watt wireless charging. All of these speeds are significantly faster than the Galaxy S22 Plus. Here's a quick look at some results I was able to achieve when it came to battery life from each phone, as well as charging times. So the last thing that we need to talk about are the cameras on each of these phones, because the experience is quite different and the results are also quite different. But before we get into the results, let's talk about the specs. So the OnePlus 10 Pro is rocking a 48 megapixel wide camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto, 50 megapixel ultra wide. It packs Hasselblad color science in modes. It can shoot 8K video up to 24 frames per second, 4K video at 30, 60, and 120 frames per second, and 1080p up to 240 frames per second. If we flip it over to the selfie camera, we have a 32 megapixel camera, and it can shoot 1080p video up to 30 frames per second. In comparison, the Galaxy S22 Plus packs a 50 megapixel wide camera, a 10 megapixel telephoto, a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot 8K video up to 24 frames per second, 4K video up to 60 frames per second, 1080p up to 240 frames per second, and 720p up to 960 frames per second. If we flip it over, the selfie camera is a 10 megapixel camera, and it can record video up to 4K 60 frames per second and 1080p at 30 frames per second. So here's a quick front-facing video test. I have the S22 Plus on my right or your left, and the OnePlus 10 Pro on my left or your right. Let me know what you think of the stabilization, the video quality, and of course the audio quality. Now let's go ahead and compare some more photos and video and a little bit more of a thorough comparison. When it comes to the cameras, it's a bit tricky. Initially, when I first tested out the OnePlus 10 Pro, the results were inconsistent. But after the latest round of updates, OnePlus has fine-tuned the camera, and now it's back and forth with the Galaxy S22 Plus. During the day, photos from both phones look great, and they both have their own unique look. The OnePlus tends to have more saturation and vibrancy when taking pictures of landscapes and architecture, whereas the Galaxy S22 Plus tends to have a more neutral look across the board. The only times I've noticed the S22 Plus cranks up the saturation is when taking pictures of flowers. The OnePlus 10 Pro is very back and forth. When using the front-facing camera, I noticed the OnePlus 10 Pro has a tendency to be cooler with more magenta tones, but it also raises the contrast to produce a very unflattering look. That said, it's not always the case. After a recent update, skin tones have improved from the front-facing camera, but it's still hit or miss. Personally, I like the look of the OnePlus 10 Pro when capturing pictures of people. It produces nice skin tones, but it has a more artistic look to the image. The OnePlus 10 Pro tends to have a sharper image. It also produces a more punchy or contrasty image. I believe a lot of this comes down to the Hasselblad image processing. Dynamic range on both phones is good, and it goes back and forth, but overall I have to give the edge slightly to the OnePlus 10 Pro. It tends to provide a better balance in the highlights and shadows most of the time. Where the Galaxy S22 Plus typically beats the OnePlus every time is with the wide angle. It's not by a huge amount, but the images tend to have better edge-to-edge sharpness and better processing overall. Moving things over to low light, the trend continues with the OnePlus capturing images with more saturation and contrast. The S22 Plus is typically brighter, but still has pretty good noise reduction. The OnePlus tends to control the highlights better, but at the cost of crushing the blacks and shadows. The S22 Plus lifts the shadows, which in return brightens the highlights. It really comes down to personal preference, but I think the S22 Plus provides a more balanced looking photo. Even in really dark situations, both phones perform pretty good, so I really don't see anyone being disappointed with either one. My only gripe would be that the OnePlus tends to give you an image that is overly processed straight out of camera, so if you enjoy editing your photos in post, you might be happier with the S22 Plus. Video-wise, the S22 Plus is just better. The biggest problem with the OnePlus 10 Pro is the BT 2020 color space. You're not able to turn it off in the settings, so no matter what you do, you're always going to be recording HDR video. While in theory this is great, I found issues with colors being oversaturated, very contrasty, and noisy in low light scenarios. To fix this, all OnePlus needs to do is enable a Rec 709 toggle in the settings, but this has been an issue for a while now on other OnePlus devices. That said, if you know what you're doing and you're comfortable editing in applications like Final Cut, Premiere, LumaFusion, etc., you can convert the BT 2020 footage to Rec 709. Outside of this issue, the S22 Plus offers more flexibility, being able to record 4K 60 frames per second on all the rear cameras and 4K 30 frames per second on the front-facing camera. Both phones have pro photo and video modes, but the Galaxy S22 Plus offers far more options and extensive controls versus the OnePlus 10 Pro. Overall, I think the S22 Plus provides a more balanced experience. It produces great looking images and it's better for recording video. The OnePlus 10 Pro has a great camera for photos, but the images coming out are much more processed, and if you don't like the look of it, it's going to be tough to edit them after the fact, unless of course you shoot everything in RAW. Okay, so let's wrap this up. You can't go wrong with either one of these phones, especially when it comes to performance. Day-to-day stuff, gaming, all of that is going to be negligible between these two devices. But if you're looking for a phone that offers more personalization and customization, the OnePlus 10 Pro I think is the clear winner. Plus it does have that stock Android vibe, so if you want to go completely neutral, you can do so. But if you want a lot of features that provide additional functionality, well, I think that's where the S22 Plus really shines. Things like floating window, multi-window, the split screen modes, and DeX are all really usable and functional features that really add to the value of this phone. Price-wise, if you can pick up the S22 Plus for $799, I think that is the better choice, especially since it has the better camera. But if this goes back up to $1,000, I think the OnePlus 10 Pro is the winner here. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to check out the links in the description if you want to purchase either one of these phones, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. I got a yard to mow.